We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Gitin. This is Gittin Daf 77b. The Gemara is discussing the fact that a husband can say to his wife during the period of Erusin, before he's actually Zocha in her property, he can say that I have no authority, I have no reshus over your property, and that is effective, and that also follows the principle that Rava laid out, because Rava said as follows: if a person says, Efshi b'takonas chachamim, person says, I don't want the takonas chachamim that's for my benefit, I don't want to take advantage of it. Kagon Zu, for example, this case We'll explain in a moment what this case is, but the point is, Shoman we do listen to him, he's able to say that. Rashi says, Yefshi b'takonas chachamim kagon zu amilsa acharisi amra Rava. Rava said this in a different context, but the point is, Shoman we listen to him, hoel v'hatakana l'tzarcho, since it was all for his benefit, nasis yachol lomar klomasu el hanasi, so he could say, that was done for my benefit, ani yefshi b'hanazu, I don't want this benefit. He's able to say that, and that applies to our case as well. And the Gemara says, Mai kagon zu, what is he referring to when Rava says kagon zu? What case is he talking about? Kid Rav Huna Amar Rav, it's like Rav Huna said that Rav said, the Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav, because Rav Huna said that Rav said, Yechol isha shatomer labala, a wife can say to her husband, Eini nizonis ve'eini osa, I don't want to be supported, but I also don't want my earnings to go to you, I don't want my work to go towards you, and so that's a situation where she is effectively saying, I don't want the takonas chachamim that was made on my behalf. Rashi says, Maika going zu ahaya umra Rav. In what context did Rava say this? Eini nizonis mishal bali. She can say, I don't want mizonos, I don't want support for my husband. Ve'eini osa lo malach, and I'm not going to do work on his behalf. Techitikun rabbanon mizoni, because the whole takana of the rabbanon that she receives mizonos lana asa, that's for her benefit. Lana asa tikun, it was made for her benefit. Zimnin de lo safka b'maisi yadeh. Sometimes she can provide for herself with her own earnings. Ve'achar kach tiknu. Then after they made that takana, they said, maisi yadeh lebala. Well, if she's already getting mizonos from the husband, so her earnings should go to the husband. Mishameva, because otherwise it would create hatred. Hilkach yichol lomar yafshi. Therefore, she's able to say, I don't want this takonas chachamim. I don't want what was instituted on my behalf. And the Gemara now continues with a second answer to the question from the previous Amud. Again, the question on the previous Amud was, how can the Mishnah say that the husband is able to throw the get into his wife's chutzner? Isn't there a rule? Mashakon seisha kana bala. And again, the first answer given on the previous Amud was that the case of the Mishnah is where the husband relinquishes his rights to that property, and he does that in the period of Erusin before he actually has the rights. There are those ownership rights in that property. And the Gemara now gives a second answer. Rava Amar Rava says, Atu yada milokanyule labal, isn't her hand also? There's also some ownership rights over her hand that the husband has. And what do we say? We employ a principle and we say, the moment she gets the get, she's going to be divorced. She's going to have full ownership, so to speak, over all of her property, over her hand. And we say it all happens at the same time. She receives the get in her hand, and then she has the full ownership, so to speak. We no longer have the rule of mashakonsa isha konabala. That all happens at the same moment. So hachanami, so over here also when he throws the get into her chutzner, gita v'chatzeira boin ke'echad. We say the rule is gita v'chatzeira, her get and the rights to her chutzner, the full rights to her chutzner, that all comes at the same time. Rashi says, Rava Amar, Rava says, Liolam b'delo kasav ladinu devarim. The case in the Mishnah is, he never relinquished any rights. And you had a question on the previous Amud, that whatever the wife acquires is acquired by her husband. Isn't her hand also acquired by the husband? The Gemara will ask specifically what that means later on. And we say the principle of Gita v'yada boin ke'echad. We say that her hand, and we say that her get and her hand, they come at the same time. Al yedei get, through the get, boy yadallah im nesina, so that's where she gets those full rights, so to speak, over her hand. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi, Rava yad di isha kakashale. Rava, he has a question when it comes to the hand of the wife, meaning to say the basis for Rava's answer is that how is it possible for her to acquire the get with her hand? Doesn't the husband have ownership rights over her hand? And therefore he says a principle of Gita v'yada boin ke'echad, and he extends that to Gita v'chatzeira boin ke'echad. But was he really bothered how it works with her hand? Nihi dekani le lamaisa yadeha. Because the husband, he only owns her hand in the sense that he gets her earnings. But yad gufa mikanile, he doesn't own the hand itself, so why is that even bothering us at all? What's the question from her yad? What's the question from her hand? And the Gemara continues, Amar le, Rav Ashi said back to Ravina, Rava yad de eved kakashale. Rava was bothered not by the yad of a wife, he was bothered by the yad of a slave. Lamando Amar Bishtar al Yedei Atzmo, because the question is, according to the one who says that a master can give his slave the shtar, can give his slave the document that sets him free, and he could give it to him directly, so we have the same question. Yad Eved ki Yad Rabo Damya. Don't we say the hand of the slave is the same as the hand of the master? It's not like you're giving it to the Eved at all. Elagito v'yado boin ke'echad. Rather, obviously, we employ a principle that Gito v'yado boin ke'echad. Hachanami here also, when it comes to the wife, Gito v'chatzeira boin ke'echad. We employ the principle, as we said, of Gita v'chatzeira boin ke'echad. And the Gemara continues, how Shchidmerad the Kosav lo Gita l'devisu, there was an individual on his deathbed and he wrote a get for his wife. Bahade panyo demale Shabsa, and Shabbos was coming, it was on Erev Shabbos. V'lo hispik l'meisav lon, he didn't get a chance to give it to her. L'mocher tokaf le'alma, the next day he became very sick. He had to find a way to give the get. Asu l'kame de Rava, they came before Rava. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Zilu amrulei, go say to him, Likni nihila, lahu duchta de Yosef begita, that he should give over to her that area, that location, the piece of land where the get is sitting. V'tezel ihi v'teichud v'tiftach v'tachasik be, and then she can go, she can open the door, she can close the door, open the door, and in that way she can make a chazak on the property. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Noal gadar paretz kolshu, if a person closes the door or the fence, or he takes the fence and he makes a breach in it, any amount, harezu chazaka, that's considered a chazaka, so she can make an acquisition of chazaka on the property. Amar le Ravilish l'Rava, Ravilish said to Rava, Mashakonsa isha konabala, what does it help? Whatever the wife acquires is acquired by the husband anyway, it's not going to be a real kinyan. So Ichsif, so he was embarrassed. L'sof, but in the end, Digli milsa darusa have, it turned out that she was not a married woman, she was just an arusa, it was just the stage of erison, she was just betrothed to him, and so therefore Amar Rava, so Rava said, Imamru bin Nesua, just because they say, Mashakonsa isha konabala by a Nesua, Yomru ba'arusa, did they go so far by an arusa, so my solution really was effective. But then the Gemara says, Hadar Amar Rava, then Rava said, he retracted and he said, Loshna arusa v'loshna nesua. It doesn't matter if she's an arusa or a nesua. It doesn't matter if she's betrothed or married. Gita v'chatzeir boin ke'echad. It is effective. My solution is effective because we employ the principle of Gita v'chatzeir boin ke'echad. She receives her get and she receives her chatzer at the same moment. But the Gemara says, V'amra Rava meikara, didn't Rava already say this chiddush of Gita v'chatzeir boin ke'echad? We saw this above on this Amud. And the Gemara answers, Ki Amra Rava, when did Rava actually state this halacha? Ahai Maisa Amra. He actually said it regarding this incident. This is where he said that principle in the first place. And Rashi explains, Takif le'alma, the individual got very sick. V'hayayore pen yamas, he was afraid he was going to die. V'tizkak liyavam, he was afraid that she would need to do yibam. V'asur l'taltal get b'Shabbos, now it's forbidden to move around to get on Shabbos. U'l'mosrula, and give it to her, so they needed to find the solution. And so then again, Rava suggested, Likniya habal l'duchta d'moches begita l'isha b'chazaka, tekarka nikna b'chazaka, let the wife, she should acquire that area, the property where the get is sitting, she should acquire it b'chazaka, v'teichud v'tiftach, again, close the door, open the door, tiskor delas ha'cheder sheyikna lo l'shem chazaka, by closing the door of the room, she makes a kinyan chazaka. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, noal delas, if he closes a door, or gadar pirza, let's say he puts a breach, he closes up a breach in a fence, or paratz geder kol shur, he makes a breach in a fence, all of those, harezu chazaka, that's all considered to be a chazaka. Liknosa creates a kinyan, shein hamocher yachol lachzer bo, at that point in time the seller cannot retract, the hashta kayoiv la chatzer v'gita b'socho, and in this fashion the husband is giving the wife the chatzer, and he's also giving her the get that's within the chatzer. Utanan nechasim shein lamachrayas. We have a Mishnah that says if you have property that's movable property, niknin im nechasim sheyesh lanachrayas, that can be acquired together with land, with property that's not movable. In this case, the get can be acquired together with the property. Bekesef b'shtar or v'chazaka. You can use either kinyan kesef, shtar, or chazaka. And Rashi continues, Rava then said, Imamru bin Nesua, just because we have the problem of Mashakonsi Shakonabala by a married woman, Shabal Yizke bin Chasim, there the husband gets the property, Yomru Ba'arusa, would they say that by a woman who's an Arusa? And Rashi points out, V'hach milsa de Rava itmar mekame ahidu amar Rava la'el, kita v'chatzera boin ke'echa. Now this statement of Rava, of Im Amru bin Nesua Yomru Ba'arusa, that was said before he came up with the idea of Gita v'chatzera boin ke'echa. The Basar Achi Hadar Bei Rava, because after that Rava then retracted, V'yamar Loshna Arusa V'loshna Nesua, he said it doesn't matter if it's an Arusa or Nesua, Kidim Mefarish V'azil. And then the Gemara had asked, V'amar Rava, didn't Rava already know this idea? Didn't he already say Gita v'chatzera boin ke'echad la'el? That was earlier, V'amay Yichsef, why was he even even embarrassed. Kiparcha Rav Ilish Lamilsa when Rav Ilish asked the question. And again, the Gemara then answered, Meikara Nami Kiyamra Rava Lahute Rutsa. When Rava said that answer, that earlier answer was said on this incident. Basar Dahadr Savra, after he retracted, so to speak, he understood this idea. V'yamar de Gita V'yada Boin Ke'echad. He said that Gita V'yada is Boin Ke'echad. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, V'hi besoch beisa. Again, he throws her again into her property, and she's within her house, so then she's going to be divorced. And the Gemara says, Amar Ula says, V'usho medes betzad beisu, v'tzad chatzeir. The kinyan only works. The gerushin is only effective if she's standing by her house or standing by her chatzer. Rabbi Oshia says, Afilu hi b'tiveria v'chatzeira b'tzipore. It's not true. Even if she's in Tiveria and her chatzer's in Tzipore, hi b'tzipore v'chatzer b'tiveria. She's in Tzipore, the chatzer is Tiveria. The point is, even if she's far away from her chatzer, meguresha, she is still divorced. But the Gemara says, V'hi besoch beisu v'soch chatzer katani. But the Mishnah says explicitly not like Rabbi Oshia. It says that she's inside her house and she has to be inside her chutzner. And the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Oshia, Hachi Kamar, here's what the Mishnah means to say, V'hi kemisha b'soch beisa, v'hi kemisha b'soch chatzer. It's as if she's in the house, it's as if she's in the chutzner. To kevon the chutzner mishtameres l'daita hi miskaresha. Since the chutzner is a secure area and it's being secured, it's again under her authority, her possession, she is considered to be divorced. And the Gemara says, Lema b'haka miflagi. Let us say they're arguing, meaning Ula and Rabbi Oshia are arguing about the following. The Mar Savar Chatzar Misham Yada Israboy. One says a Chatzar is considered like an extension of her hand, and therefore it has to be nearby. Umar Savar Chatzar Misham Shlichus Israboy. And the other one holds that Chatzar is really a kind of shlichus, a kind of agency, and therefore she's even allowed to be far away. And the Gemara says, Lo, no, the kuliyalma chatzar misham yadis rabbi. Everybody agrees that chatzar, we include the concept of chatzar, that's like an extension of her hand. Mar savar kiyada, but one holds it's actually like her hand, and the chatzar has to be similar to her hand. Ma yada besmucha av chatzera besmucha, just like her hand is nearby, it's close to her, so to her chatzar has to be nearby. V'idach, and the other opinion says, Ima yod b'dvuka, will you argue that her hand is attached to her? Av chatzera b'dvuka, so to her chatzar has to be attached to her. Of course not, that wouldn't make any sense. Ela ki yada, rather what it means is, it has to be like her hand. Ma yada mishtameres l'daita, just like her hand is secure with her knowledge, it's secured with her knowledge. Av chatzera mishtameres l'daita, so too, when we say her chatzar makes this kinyan and she's divorced, when he puts it into her chatzar, we're talking about a chatzera mishtameres l'daita. We're talking about her chatzar that is secured with her knowledge. That comes to exclude a situation of a chatzar which is not secure, which she has no control over, and in such a situation she would not be divorced. And the Gemara continues, how Gavra de Zorak la Gita Lidvisu, there was an individual who threw a get to his wife. Havakaima bechatzar, she was in the chatzar, Azal Gita nafal bepisla, and the get fell, bepisla, it fell on a piece of wood. Rashi says, Nafal bepisla gabe chaticha seitz, it fell on top of a piece of wood. Amar Rav Yosef said, Chazinan, we have to see. You have arba amos al arba amos. If that piece of wood is 4 by 4 amos, poliglei rishus l'nafshi, then it's considered to be its own rishus. V'ilo, and if not, chad rishusi, it's all considered to be one rishus. And Rashi says, Polig Rishusa Lenafshe, Ve'eno Batal Agabe Chatzir. In such a situation, it's not going to be Batal to the Chatzir, it's going to be considered its own independent Rishus, Ve'ena Migureshes, and she's not going to be divorced. The Gemara later is going to ask what exactly is the case over here to clarify what is the situation, but in any case, that's what he said. If it's 4 by 4 amos, it's its own Rishus, and she's not going to be divorced. And the Gemara now says, B'may askinan, what exactly is the case over here? It says, Zorak la Gita l'devisu have a kaima b'chatzir. It was in the chatzir. What kind of chatzir? Ilema b'chatzir dida. Now, if we're talking about her own chatzir, ki have a dalit amos, might have it. Who cares if it's 4 by 4 amos? We're talking about the chatzir of the wife. Everything in the chatzir, it all belongs to her. It's her possession, and she should be divorced. So ela b'chatzir didei. So rather, you'll say that he threw the get into his own chatzir. So kilo have arba amos my have it. So then it seemed to say that if it's not 4 by 4 amos, she is divorced. Why should that be the case? Why would she be divorced just because it's not 4 by 4 amos? This is his chatzir. And so the Gemara says, Lo, no, tzricha, the case is needed as follows. To oshla makam, we're talking about a situation where it's his chatzir, but he gave her property, he lent her space in his chatzir. The chad makam mushli inshi, and the point is, a person will lend, so to speak, give out one area of his chatzir, that'll give out. But trei mekamos, but if it's two independent areas, lo moshli inshi, that the person is not going to lend, that is not going to be effective. And the Gemara continues, V'lo amr, we don't see this halacha ela delo gavoa asara. That's only if it's not 10 high. Aval gavoa asara, but if it's 10 tvachim high, afa gav delo av arba amos. Even though it's not 4 amos, it's considered its own reshus. V'lo amr, and we don't say that ela delesle only in a situation where it is not. And Rashi explains, Inema b'chotzer dida, if we're talking about her chotzer, meaning the Isha, the wife's chotzer, ki hava arba amos mayhava, even if it's its own area, it's 4 amos, what's the difference? Harei shneim shalah, everything belongs to her. And then the Gemara said, the oshla makom, he lent her space b'chatzero in his own chotzer. Liknos boget, she's supposed to use that area in order to make the kinyan on the get. The oshla hishila, again, the word oshla means he lent her. A person lends one area, he doesn't lend 2 areas. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Aleph.